And so we just organize the session so that the students who want to progress into our postgraduate program, or those who want to go further with postgraduate beyond those of you already in the postgraduate program that you want to continue, we wanted to give you some information about what are the options for postgraduate studies, especially in terms of funding, because we know that funding is a big question for you. So firstly, I just want to run through some of our admissions requirements in the department, because those of you who are wanting to get into our next program need to know what do you need to do to get in. Those of you in third year and want to get into our honors program, the admissions requirement for our students is 62%. So that means that your final mark needs to be 62% or above for you to make it into our honors program. If you apply now, and we strongly encourage you to start applying, and many of you have already, we'll probably give you a provisional offer, although some students who are doing exceptionally well might be given a full offer. And then if your final mark meets that requirement, then you are given a final offer into our program. It's not, we don't take a certain number of students. So there are departments that take 10 honors students or 20 honors students. We take on marks. Sometimes we get a very big group, sometimes we get smaller marks. So if you get the marks, we will usually accept you. So it's basically on the marks. If you have people from outside wanting to join us, you advertise our program and say, please come and join us in the Department of Municipal and International Studies of Roads. We'll often take 65 for students from outside. Just a word of warning, if you want to, we do allow students to do joint honors, although we encourage you to do a full honors in our department. But if you apply, I recommend that you apply for a full honors as well as a joint honors, because a lot of the other departments reject all the joint honors and then they don't even come to us because you just rejected for the program. So, and then we don't even know that you've applied. So make sure that you apply for us, the other department, and then a joint as well, separately and together. For admission into masters, you need a 65 for honors. That's a 65 average mark across your courses. And with joint, sometimes we look at it a little bit differently. We do want to see a 65, especially in our component, but preferably across both. But obviously, if it's only in the other component that you're doing well, then we would advise you to rather do your masters in the other department. And then for those of you who want to do PhD, you need a 70 for your masters to proceed to PhD. And for masters and PhD studies, it's also important that you make sure that you have somebody who can supervise your studies. So you can't do a master's and a PhD program. You can't be a master's or PhD student without a supervisor, whereas an honors student you can do. But for master's and PhD, you need a supervisor, and that's why those of you who do want to enter into master's or PhD next year, I suggest you start some conversations with colleagues in the department, because we can only accommodate a certain number of students. So if you're coming late in the year, you might find that your prospective supervisor already got 5 master's students and can't take any more. So that's what you need to have in mind. Briefly then, so there are no deadlines. There's no like, if you don't submit your honors application by the end of October, we will never accept you. There's nothing like that, but we do encourage you to submit early so that you have a sense of who's coming. Exceptions, basically there are no exceptions. So those of you who think, well, I got a 60 or a 61, it's maybe a 62, we have to draw a line somewhere. And so the line that we draw for honors is 62. So please make sure that you will exceed that line, and same for our masters and same for PhD, because we don't make exceptions to those lines. And then before I hand over to the people who are going to be telling us more about funding, I also want to emphasize that the way the funding works is that it's not that every department has a pool of money. We wish we had in our basement, a big pile of cash or something, or a massive bank account with millions of rands which we could offer to students. We don't. The department doesn't have funding. Funding is centralized to the postgraduate funding office. And so that's the route that you have to apply. Because what we often know is people are so busy with your undergrad, with your honors studies that you don't really think about it. And then January you write into the department, I would love to continue. Is there any money? How can I get funding? And we don't have that funding. Almost all the deadlines for applications for funding are in July, August. Some maybe in September, so you need to apply now. That's where. So to tell us more about funding, we're very lucky today to be joined by the manager of postgraduate funding at Rhodes University, Tata Tansi. She has a background in economics. She has a Bachelor of Economics, a certificate in business accounting, a postgraduate diploma in business management, and an MBA as well from Rhodes Business School. So that's her background into now managing postgraduate funding. So she's going to tell you a little bit about what are the different options for you as postgraduate or prospective postgraduate students, and there's also some good information that you can get. Thank
you. If I could just get an understanding of out of all of you that are here, if we've got third-year students going into honors, do we? Yeah, okay. And we've got some honors going into masters and masters going into PhD. Okay, all right. So I'm Tata Tansi and I manage postgraduate funding at Rhodes University. Just a little background to say, you know, what we do. Sorry, it's just hide that. Okay. Like it was explained just now, the funding at Rhodes is centralized, or at least all that is administered at Rhodes is centralized. Of course, you are welcome to apply to external funders, and then that then follows a different process. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for funding for postgraduate studies, then our office is the central point for that. We have got funding that is internal, so it's council funded, or it is internally administered, but actually is funded by an external organization. But I'll get into that just now. With internal, what we consider internal funding, it may be that the money doesn't necessarily come from our council funding, so the budget of the university central finance, but where we have an agreement with organizations that are funding students, and therefore we administer for them. So for example, you know how you guys access the NRF through us. Yeah, so that is an external funder. You are applying directly to them, but then we then administer the entire process of you being able to get access to funding. We've got some funding that is Rhodes University Council funded. So that is from the council budget, the budget of the university, and that is what we refer to as RUPG scholarships. Under there, and I'm going to just say a few names because when we send out a call in early August, you're going to see names that are familiar and you'll be able to understand that these Rhodes University internal funding. So we've got such as Alan Gray, Henderson, RUPG, Atlantic Philanthropies. These are all going out. I've got another slide later on where I'll be able to show you when they're going out and when they'll be closing so that you get ready. We've got funding such as the Levenstein, Rhodes University African Center, Guy Butler, South African Reserve Bank. There's lots of those. These are all internal. Then we've got the external ones where we are advertising out to you. Some of them you apply to us and then we consolidate your applications, send them to the funder, or we pre-screen you. So where eligibility is certainly not met, we pre-screen off, and then those who are absolutely eligible, we send off to the funder. The funder makes the decision and sends back. With others, we have review committees here at Rhodes, even though they're externally funded, where we review all of your applications. We nominate those that are eligible. We review further, and then we make a decision on funding, and then those names we send off to the funder and say, these are the people that we have identified for your funding, and then you guys get awarded. So there's lots of those, but I'll explain more about those that are a bit more aligned with you guys in politics. There's also funding to study abroad. So there are opportunities for students, and this is usually for students who do exceptionally well, for you to go and study abroad, say in the UK, in the US for some, and in other countries that you'd be interested in studying. We also have scholarships that you don't have to apply for. So we've got scholarships such as the Merit Award. If you are a student doing third year and you are looking to do your honors, if you get distinctions, and believe me, at least one distinction in your final year, you will be able to qualify for 50% of your tuition for honors. And if you get your honors by distinction, then you get 75% of your entire tuition fee for your first year of master's. If you get a distinction in your master's, then we incentivize you with 75% off the fees of the first year of PhD. So that's just to try to incentivize students who can do this. And we are of the expectation that you all can. Then we have got the council loan, which is for students really who have not managed to secure funding, but have been accepted into the departments to study. So if you are, like Sally was saying just now, sometimes you have students in January or February who say, I actually have got this, I managed to pass. And so I've got accepted, because first you'll get that provisional acceptance, and then you get your final acceptance. And then a lot of students only then wake up and think, oh my goodness, that means I need funding in order to go. So we do have a pool of students who we do understand, haven't secured funding. And therefore, at that time, we're able to activate an RU council loan. However, we need to explain to you that this is your absolute last resort. So please rather apply for funding you don't have to pay back. This is a loan. You're going to have to pay it back when you start working. It is, however, a loan where in order for you to qualify for it, there's leniency in that we don't go and do credit checks and follow all of that stuff. So chances are you will qualify simply based on financial need. If you are not able to demonstrate financial need, then you qualify for much less than you might hope for, and it's a sliding scale of that kind. Yeah. So if your income for your home is higher than the next person, chances are you will qualify for less than that. So you don't apply for a specific amount. We tell you on that scale what you qualify for. Just to encourage you to please just check if you are receiving emails from the RU Postgraduate Funding Office. We've got mailing lists for third years, fourth years, honors, masters, and PhD. And it's on these mailing lists currently that we are advertising all of our opportunities. Our website, our webpage is currently under review, so it's not as current as we'd like it to be. We're not posting there yet because it's actually being revamped in the back end, so we can't post stuff on there. So for now, I won't be sending you off to that link. Never mind it. Just make sure that you're on the mailing list. If you are not on the mailing list, so if for the past couple of months you haven't been receiving any emails that say, hey, here's an opportunity, then please send an email to pgfunding@ru.ac.za. It's on there. And just say, I'm doing my honors. I'm interested in doing my master's next year. Please, can I be added to the mailing list? And if you're doing third year and so forth. If you tell us the level of study, and that's enough, then we'll be able to add you on there. It doesn't have to be the Rose University campus email. It can be your Gmail and whatever else that you prefer to use. So now to just narrow it down to politics. Currently, we've got the RUPG scholarships that will be going out. We're going to open these in early August. They are in the final stage of design of the advert now. We're going to open it for exactly 4 weeks. So 4 weeks later, it's going to close. We do not accept late applications. I need to say this to you now, because we will be receiving, despite me saying this, a lot of emails that say, but Sis Tato, it's very difficult because these need to go for review. We've also got the Ruth First Scholarship. Just to let you know about the RUPG, It is for all fields. So don't feel like, because I know that a lot of funding is earmarked for, the hard sciences and stuff. So a lot of humanities and social sciences students feel like, it's a schlep to just apply and not get funding. Our UPG scholarships are open to all fields of study that are offered at this university. So you already meet that eligibility criteria. Ruth First Scholarship is one of our internally administered bursaries where we actually are administering funds that were bequeathed to the university. I'm not hearing myself. Is the battery low maybe? Would you guys be able to hear me if I continued? Yeah. And Yeleti, can you hear? Yeah. Okay. She says she can. So I'll go at it this way. The Ruth First Scholarship is a scholarship that funds a PhD student. So it is for PhD only, and it is for students who are embarking on a study that has to do with human rights. So it can be politics, it can be anthropology. So there you need to understand that the competition is higher than if it was just limited to you guys. But for as long as you are demonstrating in your application that it is for the furtherment of human rights, then you're able to be eligible for that. The Rhodes University African Studies Center, so RUSC. This will also, yeah, there we go. Thank you. This will also be open later on in the year. It is not advertised by us, so the process sits with the Dean of Humanities. Sorry, I think my earrings don't like it. Okay. The RUSC scholarship is also for PhD, and it is open to all studies that can demonstrate that they are looking to further the African diaspora. So you can qualify as a politics student if you are trying to do your doctoral degree in something like African politics or any kind of work that furthers that. So you can qualify for it, but you have got to demonstrate that you are looking to develop African studies within the continent. And then of course you've got the NRF. The master's and doctoral applications for NRF are already closed. So I hope that you guys have already put in your applications. We're not able to accept any late ones. However, honors is still open. So if you're doing your third year and looking to go into honors, you can still apply until the 1st of September. The email that we sent out said that you can apply until the 15th of August, but we've had technical issues with the NRF Connect system. And so the master's and doctoral was pushed forward by 2 weeks, and we're going to do the same for honors. I'm going to send out an email to inform the university community of this. So you guys are literally getting this hot off the press. If you are needing financial means test, that's when you need to apply by the 1st of September. What we mean by that is if you were on NSFAS at all, then you must apply by the 1st of September. If you were not on NSFAS, but you would have qualified for NSFAS, so if you were eligible to be funded by NSFAS, you still can apply for NRF under the financial means. So you have to therefore, they will then run the entire process of checking your income, your family income, and whether you are considered financially needy and therefore needing to be funded at full cost. The important difference between these two, a lot of students might miss the 1st September deadline and feel like it means that they can't apply at all because they were NSFAS. You can still apply, but for as long as the 1st of September has gone by, then it means you will not be getting full cost. For this year, honors full cost amount is 150,000 Rand for the year. However, if you miss the financial needs test deadline, despite being financially needy, you will only get 100,000 Rand. So it is important that you meet those deadlines. The difference between that 100,000 Rand and 150, and I know it sounds like a lot when you're listening to it, But an honors student at Rhodes University needs at least 143,000 Rand if they are in residence. That is because postgrad residence charges you 93,000 Rand this year. And politics tuition fees were 42,000 Rand this year. So already that's 143. So if you are looking to, for example, have an allowance, then it's under 1,000 Rand a month. So either way, I'm just trying to encourage you that you need to apply for this first round as much as possible, because that's where you are able to just cover what you need. Otherwise, you end up with a full scholarship, which is 100,000 Rand, but you still end up owing money to the university at the end of the day. Yeah. And just to add a little note to say, we are working very hard to see how we can balance that out, because it doesn't make too much sense. Continuing, for scholars in politics, I managed to identify 2 self-development scholarships. So these are not scholarship by way of paying for your fees, but these are great self-development opportunities for students who are looking to study politics at postgraduate level. There is the Fort Hare Autumn School that happens once a year for the whole year, essentially. It is like a program for 25 politically engaged students who show great leadership within the community in which they live, which is, of course, the university community and the Makanda community, but also showing great engagement with the community and bringing up leadership within the space. And they have to be politically engaged. So that means that you guys are better positioned than the next person, right? To understand how to want to contribute towards the South African political landscape. So what happens here is that in every year, then an advert goes out for that year. And then they take a cohort of 25 students, not all from Rhodes, because there you are competing with students from NMU, from Fort Hare, and from Wusu. It's an Eastern Cape thing. And then you attend in blocks, and they, of course, pay for you to be there. You attend in person 3 blocks for the year. And it's really about teasing out democracy and politics within the youth leadership of South Africa. So it's a great opportunity. You know, I sat in the panel of interviews for this year, and my mind was blown by what our students are thinking and how they are engaging with the political landscape of South Africa. The 8 Bailey Travel Bursary gives you an opportunity to go to the UK to learn mainly about the politics, the political history of the UK and how that interfaced with the South African political history during the times of apartheid and even before that. And then in that tour, that in-person tour in the UK, you are also touring landmark universities like Oxford and Cambridge and all of that. And all of that is fully paid, right from your visa to your flights to your accommodation, all of that. And also it's also in other universities. So you get to network with your peers who are also in this space. So look out for that as well. And then, of course, you've got scholarships to study abroad. One of the most prestigious ones that we have that is Rhodes only is the Flanagan Scholarship. I've put a few books there, those reddish, brownish books. Please feel free to take one. This is a scholarship that was established to try to further the advancement of females in academia and in leadership in the world. And it is for South African students who are female. And it is to study abroad in the UK, so in the university of your choice there, but to be studying with the intention of coming back to South Africa to come and plow back what you've learned. It is a huge scholarship. This year, it is sitting at about 1.2 million Rand per year for 2 years for you alone, one person. So it is a big deal. Beyond just the money is the kind of exposure that you will have studying full-time and in attendance in a university that is prestigious in the world, but also being able to bring it back to South Africa to plow back. So please feel free to take some of those books and just read up on the people who have held this prestigious award, what standing it's been able to give them in their future. All right, and then we've just got some other scholarships that I identified for you. These are not internally administered, so please feel free to look them up online and just see when they'll be open. We will be advertising them anyway, even though you won't be applying to us, you'll be applying to them. There's the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust, the Rhodes Scholarship, Mandela Rhodes Foundation, the Fulbright Foreign Student Program, which is in the US, and the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. So the others are the UK mainly, and then Fulbright is the US. And then just some FAQs that are very important. A lot of students wonder about eligibility. I encourage you to please check very carefully before you apply whether you are eligible for whatever the scholarship is. Do they, what is their cutoff from as far as your academic standing? Some, for example, the department will say we only take you from 65%, but that doesn't then mean that the funder you apply to takes you from 65%. They might be hedging at 70%. So just check whether you are eligible. Also check the priority fields of study. Some funders will say all fields are welcome, but others will say must be studying chemistry towards cancer research. Others will say, like I was saying now with Ruth First, human rights. So even though politics students qualify, if you're not focused on human rights, then you're not eligible, So read on those requirements. There are some age restrictions as well for many, the NRF has some. And I've noticed that at Rhodes University, some of the internal ones have some as well. So you've got 36 years as a cutoff. You've got, I saw another one for 32 years. So look at whether there is an age restriction for the funding that you want. And then, what to include in your application. I've just put a few of these just to say very important for you to make sure that your transcript is the official academic transcript. I cannot tell you how many students take a screenshot of their marks on Ross and then they apply with that. And if the deadline has passed by the time we review your application, you're not able to send in the correct thing, and all you had to do was to go to Eden Grove, right? So please make sure it's an official transcript. Make sure also that if you are requested for requested to provide identity documents or pay slips, whatever, get those certified. It's just always the safer way to go. No one will say I rejected because it's certified, but a lot will say I rejected because it's not certified. Yeah. And then, of course, like I said, if there's financial needs, please ensure that you've got all the documentation that can prove your family income. When it comes to what to include in the research section of your applications, for honors, we just need to see that you have an understanding of what you'd like to do, So the fact that you don't have a title that's, final and has been discussed with a supervisor is fine. But if you're able to say, for example, let's say it's a Ruth First one, I'm looking to study this, that, and the other that looks at how human rights are, for example, prevalent in a particular demographic of people in the country. So at least you're showing that this is the area of study that you're looking at. We don't then need any further information. We expect that as you start your honors program will be when you start getting supervisors, when you're able to engage and to get into more of that. However, at masters, we expect you to have a research outline that shows your research concept, your goals, your aims of your study. So we expect to see that there's been much more thought that's gone into this. We need it to be comprehensive. We need it to be a bit of a summary of what you're looking to do. Some students, by the time they go into masters, know exactly what they want to do, because a lot of the time you're already going to be working with the supervisor that you started with in honors. So you're able, if you have your methodology all fledged out and all of that, by all means include all of that in, because we would like to see how far you've thought it through, and of course you're in better standing. And then with PhD, it is much more detailed. We want your problem statement. We want you to identify the knowledge gaps that you're looking into. We want to see your objectives, your aims of your study. We need you, if you have got any research outputs that you've already got in place, we need to see those so that you can demonstrate that you are an avid researcher already. We would like you to show that your work is original. We want you to show that you are contributing to the body of knowledge. So why should there be such a study at doctoral level? So the rigor is different. We don't expect of the honors student what we would expect of a doctoral student. And then I've just got more on the application here, just some tips. When you are applying and your names are a particular way on your ID, please show them exactly that way in an application, because you need to remember when you're applying for funding, it is a FICA kind of process, right? It's a process where a financial agreement is being written up. So if you're going to omit that name that you don't like, I know I have a name that I don't like. I don't put it in anything, but I put it in proposals because it's the only me, right? And then don't change the fonts of the application form. A lot of the time students want to differentiate themselves, right? So you start, putting some fancy font, but a lot of the time the font that has been chosen, ugly as it may be, is because it's much more legible and it's easier for us as reviewers. When we sit to review applications, we're going through hundreds. So we don't want your, the fancy ones at that time. By all means, if your CV has that, that's a whole other issue, but make sure it's legible. We need to be able to read it easily. Be succinct in your, so when we were talking earlier about the research outline and everything, the more you write isn't the better. We're looking for quality. So please, just tie it up neatly, make sure that we can understand what you're trying to put across to us, but we don't have to read all day. Yeah. And then when it comes to listing your education and other things, please do them in the inverse of how they happened. So we want to see the most recent one first. If you've just got your honors and you're going into masters, I don't want to see about, your primary education and everything. I need to see your honors and then it can go backwards. List all of the awards and publications and, any experience that you've got in research assistance or in research. Sometimes you find yourself assisting your professor and then in projects that they've got. List those. It shows that you've been exposed to research before. List all of the leadership positions, any community engagement that you've done, because like I said earlier, there is a lot of focus on developing the engaged global citizen leader. So beyond just the academic, we want to see what social impact you're going to have. We want to see, that you're going to make the world a better place. Your transcripts, again, official. If you've got any qualifications that you already have, may the certificates be in there as well. And when you are going to send something, send it certified. Like I said, your certificate copy should be certified as a true reflection of the original. And then, of course, references. If you're going to list your referees in your application, make sure that you've asked them first. There are a lot of instances where we contact, supervisors and say, hey, this student says you can give a glowing report of them. And they are like, which one is this one? Because there's so many of you guys. But if they know that you've listed them, then they're ready. They prepare themselves to answer questions about you. Also very important, check with your supervisors which, for example, email address can be used in this. It's not always, believe it or not, it's not always the Rose University one. And we've just discovered that with the NRF Connect, because your supervisors already had ORCID numbers before the new system came. And now there's just a whole lot of to and fro about, but I listed you, but it's not showing on my side. So please, this is a new tip. Make sure that you ask your supervisor or your referee which email address you should use, that they can be able to access the form. And then, yeah, just the final bit of information, just some tips about reading the terms and conditions of your funders, please. There are funding limits that are always in place in institutions, not just at Rhodes. Some funders have got their own funding limits. So to say, for example, a funder says, we are funding you for 150,000 Rand. You are free to get funding from other places, but you may not exceed an additional 10% of our funding. So that already limits you to 15,000 Rand extra. If you're going to sign a contract for another 50,000 Rand, you are in breach of the contract with your funder. So please make sure that you read. There are expenses that are found eligible, there are expenses that are not. So for example, you might think that it's okay to buy a book with your funder's money. And maybe they are saying, no, we would rather you buy a laptop and then you use open source, and therefore you don't have to buy books. There are different types of little terms and conditions that funders have, and they are very strict about that. Accredited accommodation is one of those things. Duration of funding. We have a lot of students who, for example, you do your honors for 1 year, something doesn't go your way, and you just assume that if you go into the next second year of honors, that you'll be funded. But most of the funding will say duration for honors funding is 1 year. And if you don't finish, then you have to find other funding to continue that. Expectations of compulsory service. There are companies that fund students for postgraduate studies, and a lot of them have an underwriting there to say you will have to work for us for a period of 3 years before you can work anywhere else. So look for these kinds of clauses and just make sure that you know what they expect of you. Reporting requirements. At Rhodes University, we expect a report in July and one in December for all of our internal funding. But different funders require different reports. Some might want a quarterly report. Some want a report from you and a separate report from your supervisor. Some want a report just from your supervisor and nothing from you. So just check and make sure that you can be able to be compliant. Funder acknowledgement requirements. Funders normally, but not all, so read and check, they normally would like to be acknowledged in the work that you publish at the end of your studies. So your thesis should acknowledge and say, this was funded, by Tato Tansi, and you acknowledge and you put their logo there. Some of them want for there to be a logo, some do not give you rights to the logo, so go and read. Every single agreement that you sign, make sure you read it carefully and you understand what's required of you. There are funder communication requirements as well. I'm telling you, I'm just going to use my voice. Some funders require that you communicate with them at particular intervals. So there are funders, believe it or not, who want you to write an email to thank them for the award and say, thank you for this award. I acknowledge that for there to be the scholarship, a life had to be lost, and therefore I'm grateful. And yes, that is the truth. And sometimes these funders are counting back, right? So you've signed your acceptance and you've sent it, and they have got it in their agreement that you've got, say, 21 days to send them a thank you. And then you didn't read that and you didn't send it. 21 days go by, they award your funding to another student who's gonna write that thank you letter, right? So read, and just check what is required of you. That is my last slide. And do I take questions now?
I think it's going to be best if we put all the questions at the end, so we can take all your questions in one go. Is that okay? You're not rushing?
I'm not in a rush.
Okay.
I think I don't need this yet. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive and very helpful, I'm sure, to many of you. To add on quickly on the references, because to us usually that you're asking references. Academics know it's part of our job. We have to write references for you, so you don't need to feel like you can't write to us and ask, even though it's in theory, we don't always know who you are because there's so many of you, but we understand you need a reference. The easiest thing is ask us well in advance. It's not like I need a reference by tomorrow. Send us all the information. What is this funded for? Do I need to send you a letter? Do I need to send a letter to somebody else? Or am I going to get a separate email? I'll send you a letter so I know what to expect. And send me a CV. A nicely well done CV, which include any additional information I need. And a transcript is helpful as well. So that's what you need to send to your lecturers if you would like to, if you need a reference letter. And we do them, even for third years. So don't feel scared to ask us. Obviously, if you're that third year is always in class, whose name I know, he talks, then I'm more likely to be able to say something meaningful. Okay. So thank you very much. That was so many questions that are answered now, and so many helpful tips for just thinking about postgraduate studies. We're now going to welcome Yeleti Honwana, who's joining us, as you can see on the screen. And she is a program officer at the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation. And in this role, she's the lead organizer of the foundation's African Fellows Program. And this might be of interest to many of you. Sonwana studied at Boston University in the US, where she completed a master's in a field familiar to us, international relations. And so we welcome her. Thank you so much for joining. I don't know where to look to see you, but I can see you. And thank you so much for joining us and being willing to take the time to speak to our students. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me today. And I'd like to, thanks. I'm excited to talk to you all today. I want to just thank, very quickly, Dr. Magaja and Dr. Matthews and the rest of the Rhodes team who's involved in making this happen. I've done a lot of these kinds of virtual meetings and dealing with the tech and the live process. I mean, it's been fabulous so far. So I also want to just thank Tato for that presentation. I've learned so much about the other available opportunities as well. And so I hope that we can also add the HFG funding opportunities to the list that you all are sharing over there at Rhodes. So let me first make sure that the share screen is happening in the way that I want. I practiced this. Are you all seeing the first slide of the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, great. So let me quickly just, talk a bit about myself, the foundation, and then I'll get into the program that I want to talk about today. So I'm Yeleti Honwana. As Dr. Matthews said, I'm a program officer and I'm the lead organizer of this Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation African Fellow Awards. So the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation examines enduring and urgent problems of violence. We do this through basic and applied research, and we aim to understand the causes, the manifestation, and the control of violence. And then we spread this knowledge to inform policy, practice, and public discourse, and of course, to advance scholarship. The African Fellows Award is one of 3 of our larger sort of grant competitions that we offer. It's a 2-year mentorship program that recognizes and supports emerging African scholars carrying out their PhD and who are studying aspects of violence on or directly related to the African continent. So there we go. Oh, next slide. It's all working. How exciting. Okay, so essentially what I want to do in this, 10 to 15 minutes that I have with you all is talk a bit about what we do with this program, what the intention is, the opportunities that we sort of have available, and then talk a little bit about some of the do's and don'ts. And maybe what I'll be doing is just adding to Tato's really comprehensive list that she just offered. So the African Fellows Program is sort of organized in 5 buckets, if you will. There's 2 buckets that really look predominantly at the research proposal. And we start with the research proposal essentially because it is the foundation, right, of the research, the writing, and the eventual content that's going to be produced, right, whether it's the PhD, whether it's a project that you're applying for funding for. And so we spend time in the beginning of this work, in the beginning of this program, and we break it up in 2 pieces. The first piece is the research proposal, which is an in-person meeting somewhere on the continent. This year, Dr. Magaja was good enough to join us as one of our mentors. And we had that meeting in Maputo in Mozambique, where I'm from. And what we do there is really we get applications from scholars from all over the continent. The application is open every other year, essentially every 2 years. And we accept applications from the social sciences and the humanities, but really any kind of study that is making at its core some sort of interrogation around the causes of violence, conflict, and that can span anywhere from domestic violence all the way through to terrorism, radicalization, civil war, environmental violence, anything really that is sort of described as interpersonal violence. And so in that initial research proposal workshop, we look at sort of the proposal writing theory and practice. We do a deep dive into research methodologies, and we do training that really is intended to augment and support the training that's already happening at the PhD level. We then do about a month later a second proposal workshop, and that's a virtual meeting. And there we sort of go through the presentation of these proposals. We do thematic roundtable discussions about issues that are sort of pertinent or that are coming up in various ways, either in the projects that we've supported or that are sort of pertinent sort of issues of the day within academia. So for instance, we had a roundtable discussion on decolonizing the curricula, right? What does that look like? How do we, as Africans understand that? But also, how do scholars, emerging scholars understand how that applies to their own work, right? So taking sort of what can be nebulous or abstract conversations and look at the practicalities of including that kind of theory, that kind of work in your own research day to day. After the research proposal workshops, we offer the first part of our research and writing grant. We offer $10,000 over 2 years. And so in the first year of the program, we offer $5,000. And then in the second year of the program, a further $5,000. We leave it up to you how you want to use this funding based on where you are in your PhD, right? If you're more firmly in the writing portion of your PhD, then that is what you will use the funding for, and you detail that for us in our budget worksheets. And then if you still are going to be using funding for travel, for other research purposes, you just have to make that clear in your budget. All right. The second half of the program is really around writing and publishing. And so what we start with in the second year is sort of what we call our writing period. The reason we have an official writing period is because at the end of the second year, towards the end of the second year, we take our cohort of scholars to an international African Studies Association meeting. That'll either be the ASA here in the United States or most often the ASA in the UK, and both of which happen between August and November of the sort of second year of the program. And so we spend the first half of that second year together really thinking through some of the theory around writing a PhD. What does that look like? We're working specifically with you all on perhaps just one chapter of your PhD, but we're hoping that you'll take these tools, these tricks, and some of this training and apply it, right, to the rest of your PhD. We also do content review. There's substantive review that's done by the mentors, and these are 4 to 5 people who will be accompanying you throughout the 2 years that you're within this program. We then have, you apply for this international conference, you have to be accepted yourself, and then the foundation will sponsor the travel, the accommodation, and any other incidentals while you are at this international conference. One thing that we have added, and this is sort of the feedback that we were receiving from our grantees, was that it was really important to talk more about publishing, right? What happens after the PhD? And so often some of the support that emerging and junior scholars need is that publishing support. Publishing, much like applying for grants, is a different kind of way of writing. It's different qualitatively from the PhD. And so there are definitely publishing tips and tricks that we want to share about writing and submitting to international journals. And so we have sort of a peer review 101 course that gives you some of that information, again, that is likely been already given to you at during your PhD course, but that we like to just give more information about because we're sort of in community and in conversation with a lot of these journals. So I did want to spend just a bit of time talking specifically about applying for funding. I've been a program officer here at the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation for 7 years. And there are some things that I think Tato mentioned that I wanted to put a finer point on, and other things that I just, if I could tell people again and again, do not do these things, or make sure you have done these things, then I'd like to. And so I'm really excited just to spend a little bit of time talking about the do's and the don'ts of applying for funding. Again, because writing for grants, it is different than other academic writing, right? There are some ways in which there's some assumptions that you can make, especially disciplinarily, when you're writing for your PhD or you're writing other academic work, that you just cannot make when you're writing for to different funders. So let me highlight sort of my main do's to begin with. Read the application guidelines, right? Tato mentioned it, Sally mentioned it. It's so important. We spend a lot of time putting together these documents. We detail as much as possible everything that we'd like to see in these applications. So do read those guidelines. I cannot tell you how often I get emails or calls from prospective grantees, and I'm like, you just didn't read it. You did not read what is on the website. So do yourselves a favor and begin there. It'll answer a lot of questions around eligibility, and I guess some of the sometimes weird recommendations that funders tend to make. I have to say, after hearing Tato, I've never heard of a foundation that asks you to write a thank you email. Luckily, we don't ask you to do that, but my goodness, if that's in those guidelines, then please do read them. The second thing really is to know your funder. Foundations are all different, funders are all different. They have their own remits, they have their own, issue areas that they care about. The foundation happens to be most interested in understanding the causes of violence. And so, make sure that your project or that your application is really speaking to what it is that the funder is requesting. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to change your project, right? It's just understanding what parts of your project potentially are most in line with what it is that the funder is asking for. So go to the website, look at what's been funded before, contact the foundation, right? We as program officers, as grant makers, we're here to serve you, right? So I welcome calls, I welcome emails. You're completely within your rights to contact the foundation. That being said, I recently had an applicant who wrote no less than 10 emails about one project. Don't do that. It's not necessary, right? Like, out of those, 10 emails, 6 of those emails could have been answered by going to the website. So first impressions matter, pay attention to that. But definitely, if there's something that you are unsure about, that you are not seeing on any of the resources that have been made available online, call them, get in touch with us, and have your questions answered. That is 100% your right. Do get a second and third and potentially fourth pair of eyes to look at your work. This is just, it should be really standard. I'm sure your advisors and professors have told you this again and again. You're just, so often you're in the work, right? You're sort of tunnel vision. You've read your work so many times. There's just so many things that you might miss. So one, for grammatic reasons, it's good to get another set of eyes to look at your work. The other reason also is because when you're writing for funders, we're not always steeped in your discipline, right? There might be things that we need to understand, questions that need to be teased out, things that maybe need to be written in a way that is much more accessible depending on the funder. So get a second or third pair of eyes and get people that are also outside of your discipline to read your work. And then finally, do answer that so what question. Essentially, why is this research important? Why are you the person to carry out this research? How is this research relevant, perhaps beyond the specific region that you're looking at, or beyond the specific time period you're looking at? Is there some way that we can understand this in a broader context? And you don't have to force this question, right? If there's a particular inroad that you're making that, has never been done in this particular context with these people or within this region, then state that. And that's all right. You don't need to ham this up, but it is important to let the funder know why this work is important and why it's relevant, especially as Tato said, beyond academia, is there some sort of utility in your research beyond academia? Can it be useful to practitioners, policymakers, other researchers as well, of course? In terms of the don'ts, I mean, some of this is really standard, but we like to say it again. Don't submit a late or incomplete application. We have various reasons for having the various parts of our applications in there. It's just information that is necessary to review your work. So do not submit incomplete applications. Also, it depends on the funder about how they feel about late work, but generally, if 99% of the applicants were able to get their work in on time, it's not going to look favorably upon you that you weren't able to do so. So, make sure that you're really aware of the deadlines. If there are times, associated with those deadlines, pay attention to them. We happen to have a deadline of 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is incredibly specific, but just don't be that person that emails at 12:31 saying I can't submit because the application portal is closed or whatever it is. We give what we think are sort of adequate times for the application to roll in. So do pay attention to that. Another don't that we like to mention at the foundation, because we fund multidisciplinarily, just avoid the use of jargon, right? Don't use jargon to the degree that it becomes almost impossible to understand what it is that you're trying to communicate, right? That you are so steeped in the language of your discipline that it makes it very difficult for those outside of your discipline to understand what it is that you're trying to communicate. So simple, clear, direct prose. If you need to show that you understand the work, that you understand the literature that exists, show that, but there's no need to sort of hammer it because it just becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to read as a reviewer. Do not include additional information unless it's asked for. More is not always better. Again, as Tato said, there's no need to pad your application. Funders really shape their applications the way they do for a reason. This is the work that we need to review. There are specific moments in which we will invite you to offer more information, but if that's not the case, then there's no need to use it. And again, as Tato mentioned, think about being a reviewer. You're reading hundreds and hundreds of these applications. If you need to read more than the allotted, pages for each one, it's just not going to bode well for you. So for our purposes, we ask people to write 15 pages double space for the research proposal. Stick to that 15 pages. Do not assume that your work has never been done before. This is something that overwhelmingly we see with junior scholars, again, and emerging scholars is, they can write in a way that, makes it as though this work has never been done before. Academia is very old. People have been researching things for a very, very long time. The likelihood that the particular questions you're asking have never been asked before are low, but what there is there can be innovation and there can be novelty in what you're showing in terms of understanding that you're building or countering on a particular body of work, a particular literature, and so understanding that perhaps the particular people that you're looking at have never been studied in quite this way, or the questions have not been posed in quite this way. You definitely want to show that novelty and you want to show where your innovation is, but the assumption that this work has never been done before can sometimes just be detrimental. I think it's always important to remember that you're building on a body of work, you're building on a literature, or you're countering a particular literature, right? But there is some engagement with work that has come before. And it's really important, you know, as an academic professional, to show that you understand that there is a body of work that came before and how you are engaging with that body of work, whether positively or negatively or neutrally. And then finally, don't get discouraged if you're unsuccessful. You know, don't assume your project isn't a good one if it isn't approved. Grants are incredibly competitive. The foundation, for instance, has about a 10% acceptance rate. And that's not to say that there aren't, you know, grants that we get that aren't fantastic, that aren't stellar. It's just it's an incredibly competitive field. And so don't let that sort of put doubts in your head about the validity of your own work. And I guess something that could be added to the do pile is when you do get an unsuccessful response, ask for feedback. Again, that is completely your right to ask for feedback and make sure that you can strengthen your own projects. So finally, I just wanted to talk very briefly about what we are hoping to do with the African Fellows Program. I mean, and something that I think is useful for scholars to understand, right? This is training that supports the PhD, but it's also training that should support you beyond your PhD. What we hope that our scholars are getting, our fellows are getting, is foundational work that will support them for years beyond their PhD, that they're able to apply for funding to organizations that are even more competitive than we are, to organizations that are offering more money and broader opportunities than we are. And so a lot of the work that you're doing here with the mentors and with the HFG staff is really foundational to some of those opportunities. What we offer is a continent-wide community of scholars, right? Both those within your cohort of 10 to 12 in whatever year you may be accepted, but also for the alumni, right? The foundation has scholars that are being funded at the doctoral level, like the African Fellows Program. We also have another doctoral funding competition called our Distinguished Emerging Scholars Program, excuse me. And then we also have postdoc scholarship, postdoc funding that we offer, that we call our Distinguished Scholars Program. And so being a part of the HFG network allows you access to all of these scholars, right? And so finally, as I mentioned, this is really a pipeline for funding opportunities. We're not an institution of higher education. What we care about is that we're preparing you to be competitive, not only in our internal grant competitions, but for grant competitions, you know, around the world. And eventually, I think the main idea here is that it's moving beyond sort of emerging and junior African scholarship, that these are scholars and you are all scholars that will become senior scholars, will become leaders in your fields, if you will. And so if we're able to help in a small way in setting up that foundation, then we're more than happy to. So I'll stop there. I don't know if I've gone over time, but please feel free to be in touch with the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation. You can check us out at our website, hfg.org. You can contact me directly, and please do follow us on Twitter and on Facebook or LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for doing it. Thank you for taking time, and thank you for that helpful information. It also helps our students to think beyond here. You know, sometimes all you're thinking is, can I get into the next program? But there are also opportunities outside. And now to close, I want to introduce you to someone you might not yet have met, Dr. Cecilia Nediwe, who's in our department. And those who haven't already met her, you will, I'm sure, meet her soon. She's joined us this year, and before becoming an academic, once upon a time, she was a PhD and master's and even an undergrad. And she wants to just share briefly some of the exciting programs that funded her research.
Thank you, Sally, for that introduction. Good evening, everybody. So when I was accepted to study my PhD at Rhodes University, I was very excited. I think you've all had that experience when you receive that acceptance letter that you're going to study. So I was very excited. But at the same time, I was stressed because I was not very sure how I was going to pay for this program. So I quickly contacted my networks to point me to the different scholarships that exist that support postgraduate programs, doctoral programs. And I applied to many institutions. One of them is the Graca Machel Trust Scholarship. So just referring to what the last speaker said, don't get discouraged when you are rejected. So my application with the Graca Machel Scholarship, Trust Scholarship, was not, did not go through. But I was very fortunate in that I was accepted by the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences, the NIHSS. I don't know whether any one of you have heard about that scholarship? Okay, so the NIHSS, which is the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences, is based in Johannesburg. They are headquartered there. They support PhD programs. So they have two programs, one that is called the NIHSS Sahuda Scholarship. So this particular scholarship targets South African students that are studying within the universities in South Africa. So when you go to their website, they have what they call the doctoral schools. So Rhodes University is one of the doctoral schools that they collaborate with. So as a student at Rhodes, you already qualify to apply for this particular scholarship. So they support programs in the humanities and social sciences. And every year they take about 120 students on this particular scholarship. So in addition to the NIHSS Sahuda Scholarship that targets South African students, the NIHSS has a Pan-African scholarship, which is the NIHSS Codestria Pan-African Pathways Scholarship. So I was accepted on this particular scholarship, which supports non-South African students that are studying at these doctoral schools, Rhodes again being one of them, that are pursuing a full-time doctoral program at this particular university. So both the NIHSS Sahuda Scholarship and the NIHSS Codestria Scholarship, these are full-time scholarships. So you are required to be resident at that particular university when you are offered this particular scholarship. Okay, so one of the common issues about these two scholarships is that the grant is the same. So at the time, it was 120,000 annually and for 3 years. I'm told that now it's been increased to 136,000 rands annually. So in addition to the NIHSS program, which supported my tuition as well as my upkeep, because I had to resign from the job where I was working to come and pursue my PhD full time. It was able to cover my tuition as well as my day-to-day upkeep. But this particular scholarship was managed by the postgraduate funding office. So they did take care of the school fees as well as the monthly allowance. So whenever you're doing your project, one of the things that you have to think through is whether it's a PhD or a master's, there are other components that are very important that would not necessarily be covered by one particular scholarship. So in my case, my research study involved traveling in the different countries in the SADC region where I had to meet my different participants. So I had to think of how I was going to cover this particular course of my degree program. So I was again introduced to various institutions that support various granting programs. At a PhD level, I applied for the Social Sciences Research Council Next Generation Scholarship. So I was offered this scholarship. So the Next Generation Scholarship, it is divided into 3 stages. So you've got the proposal writing stage, the grant, and the final writing stage for this particular program. So while some students have been able to get the proposal stage, the research stage, as well as the final writing stage, there are those students who've only been able to get the research stage and the writing stage. So it depends. I was able to get the research writing grant, which then was about $12,000. So it is a very generous scholarship, but very competitive. So unlike the NIHSS scholarship that targets students that are studying at universities within South Africa, the Social Sciences Research Council Next Generation Scholarship, it targets students that are studying within the South African universities and beyond. So you have students who are studying at different universities in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, that also apply for this particular scholarship. So the writing stage is also now about $15,000 US, and the proposal stage, I think it's about 5,000. But all that information, you can find it on their page. So if you can Google the Social Sciences Research Council Next Generation Scholarship, or just the Next Generation Scholarship, it should be able to give you that information. So for this particular scholarship, the next opening will be in February next year. But for the other scholarship by the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences, it will open sometime next year. Again, when you go to their website, you can be able to find the contact email addresses. So you can write for more information about this particular scholarship. So going back to the Social Sciences Research Council Next Generation Scholarship. So again, it is phased in 3 stages. So depending on where your interests are, and this is particularly for the doctoral students. So you can check out these scholarships. So what is also common with these 2 scholarships, the NIHSS Pedestrian Scholarship, the NIHSS Sahuda, as well as the Next Generation Scholarship, is that they go beyond just caring about giving you the financial resources. So they also organize workshops. I think our last speaker speaks to that. They organize doctoral workshops where they provide support, for your research, for the development of your research proposals and the general research writing process. So for example, the NIHSS during our time, they also provided funding that supported the editing process of the PhD program. Then both scholarships too, they provide a mentorship program where they allocate students mentors that walk through with you, because sometimes the PhD or master's program can be a very lonely journey. So being part of the broader network beyond the university helps you to have a very rich experience in terms of your program. You're able to benefit from the different scholars who are doing similar projects and work in your field. So for me, it was really an enriching experience in that I was able to develop networks within the university space, as well as these networks and the different students and scholars that I met in these different programs. And this has continued post my PhD program, in that we have this alumni team. We are in conversations, we exchange information. There are also opportunities for publication. For example, the NIHSS does provide a platform for its alumni to publish. And also it has that platform where it awards, I don't know whether whether one wants to use that word, award, provides funding to its alumni team that has published from their PhD or from any other research that they've conducted post their doctoral program. So basically, those are the two programs that I was attached to. And just to also mention, the NIHSS Codesria Scholarship, it takes about 37 students a year, while the SAHUDA that supports South African students takes 150 students a year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think, wow, technology. I think that what you've seen here is also just that there's so many different things that you can do and so many different possibilities. Some of them are short term, some of them are long term, and there are lots of different ways to think your way into the future for those who want to continue in academia. So I know it's getting late, and our guests also have to get home, or I don't know, Yeleti, what time it is, but I'm sure you also have things to do there. But are there any questions for any one of our speakers? Does anyone have a question?